Hi, everyone. My name is Carla Martinez. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and they, them, theirs. And my project titled is In the Know, Deaf Latinas y Familias. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started with background for my project, but really also just for myself, just so you all know how and why I came to working with this project, right? So I identify as a queer and documented Latina woman, and I'm also hearing. I always want to start off like that, or I try to start off like that, because the communities that I work with, I specifically look at deaf undocumented Latinx students in higher education. And as a hearing person, I just always want to make that clear. So I'm, like I mentioned, I'm hearing, but I did go to Cal State Northridge and I graduated from the Department of Education in Deaf Cultural Studies. Along with that, I also was a part of various community efforts, community organizations within Cal State Northridge, but also outside of Cal State Northridge that really brought me together and like closer to work with deaf undocumented Latinx people. So these are just a couple of the people that really helped me along the way. Of course, my parents too. And just like other community members, like I mentioned, in and out of CSUN, who have really shaped who I am today. So with that being said, going into just the context for my project, the specific project, it all started with my first deaf Latina professor who was gracious enough to share her narrative and her story, her experiences with me and with the rest of our class about how she felt growing up, she felt she had to choose between being deaf or being Latina, and how that's not just a singular experience. So even as a hearing person majoring in deaf studies, I even felt isolated within deaf studies. I couldn't really find myself within it. I couldn't see myself in it. And even in like ethnic studies, and on the other hand, in ethnic studies and my work at the Dream Center with undocumented students, I saw the disparities of how we were just being ableist and how we were just perpetuating autism within our day-to-day activities and not reaching out to deaf Latinx students and their families about what they may need or just resources that may be of use. So really all of that is why I'm passionate about highlighting where these two communities merge and really just dismantling that like border, that right, like that division that people assume that they don't merge, right? But that's, yeah, so that's where I'm looking at. That's my passion project. So for my summer activities and my summer partner, I partnered up with Deaf Latinos y Familias org, which is an organization based in Los Angeles. And their mission is to promote Latinx culture amongst deaf Latinx people, and then also awareness to parents about deaf culture. So the objectives of the summer project, there was 3 parts to it. The first was curriculum, the second community workshops, and lastly, connections and resources. So the main purpose of my project was, as I mentioned, curriculum and community workshops. What I mean by curriculum is bringing American Sign Language classes to parents, siblings, and even sometimes deaf children themselves. So really we see this language disparities between the Latinx community and the deaf community. So and pay attention that like they need to know English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. And it's really tough for people to know all of them and to have access to all these languages, right? To either of those 3 languages. So that's what the curriculum and the classes were for. Also, it's just providing education to deaf youth and their families on how to communicate better, and not just with home sign language too, that like home signs that they already have developed. And then lastly, the workshops really just help put that all together. So the workshops were to share tools to understand how to access higher education and even prep for college, which sometimes it may seem premature where like the deaf children are maybe still in elementary school, but I believe as well as many others that it's not too early to be thinking about higher education and if that's even an avenue that they would want to take. Lastly, resources and connections. So just bringing in my own expertise and my experience of working and going to higher education, but really working in higher education as and also as a Dream Center intern, just like different Dream Centers and having connections within different different Cal States and different UCs, and even community colleges, right? So all that material and resources available to the parents and the families if they choose to use it. That way, they also feel like they have an active role in their child's education. These are just some of the flyers that we had for summer activities. The Day of the Dead one, that one was for November, that one was later in the year. And also these were just, excuse me, either had a cultural aspect to it or had some meaning for it, or maybe were just like a know your rights workshops or just workshops for others. Like for example, even we had a workshop about rent control and also just how to apply for different grants on their own, especially during the time of COVID. And I also want to just make sure to mention that these were via Zoom, but also as things started bettering within the community and people started healing, there was also in-person events and classes. So the reflections and future directions. Reflections on this project, it was just a lot to take in, but it was really, really good. Everything was really, really good. Of course, there were some bumps in the road. For example, it was harder to engage with the community at first because of COVID, and of course, the scare and the real implications of COVID and what that means for our communities, especially Latinx communities in Southern California, who were highly impacted, right, in many different ways, not just because a family member had COVID, but just, again, for many different ways. So just like real life situations, right, that happened that made it harder for the events to happen and to have like a lot of community members go and be a part of it. However, as I mentioned a little bit before, once the restrictions started lifting up and once people started healing, it gradually became easier towards the end of the summer, towards the end of the year, to have more people go into the events and show support, right? And with that, also that follows up to my next point, how community organizing and support. This really just solidified for me how community already has their own thing going on, right? How they already have something functional and it's already like they work within themselves to make things happen, which is amazing to see and amazing to be a part of, really, because that's really why I'm in my doctoral studies in the first place, was because of my community who like pushed me, but also just like the community activism and the collectiveness of everything going on and like the mutual aid. That's what really pushed me to do my doctoral studies. So being able to go back into the community, into a different community that I wasn't a part of before, and now trying to see how that functions and just kind of remembering how people put in like whatever help they can in order for events to happen. Like for example, people bringing in just like chairs and tables and giving people rides, like really just minute details that really make things function and work. Right. So that was amazing to see and to be a part of. And then and going forward, really, I didn't finish everything that I wanted to do. And some things I didn't get to start. But the great thing is that just leads into my ambitions for the summer project leading into the rest of the year and for future years possibly as well, right? This is like a community partnership that I want to be a part of, that I want to be involved with for years to come. Like it's not just a summer project. That's where it started, but like the future is bright for this because there are so many different projects and so many different aspects of it that can still be developed, not even just by myself, like just in general. And then really just, I wanted to make sure to mention that Mellon Public Scholars and just this whole program has just really helped me and like shaped my understanding of community engaged partnerships, right? How as an academic, my work and my expertise and what I'm researching and dealing with and learning can also be applied within the community, but also knowing that I don't know everything, right? And that I have so much yet to learn. So that was great. And shameless plug, I actually wanted people, if they could, and if they're able to, follow this community organization on Instagram, and their is at def_Latinos_org, O-R-G. So yeah, thank you so much for coming to my virtual presentation. Special thanks to Dr. Stephanie Maroney, who has been super supportive throughout the whole project. Dr. Ryan Cartwright, who has also been amazingly supportive within my research and also this project in general. And then my friend and peer colleague, Brindavani Avila, who also helped me shape this presentation and just has kept me going throughout the doctoral program. And last but not least, to Mellon Public Scholars, the program, because without them, none of this would have been able to happen. But I'm so glad that I was able to, and I'm very grateful for that. So I wish we had a Q&A, but hopefully you can contact me some way and my information will probably be added to this presentation. So thank you all very much.